Hello friends, I'm Sachin Barwar from Team Decipher, and our team has decided to bring you the economic survey for the present year and in a precise and lucid manner so that you can and you will be, I'm assuring you, you will be able to answer the questions which examinations might ask from this particular segment of economic survey. So, today, I'll be taking the chapter which is mentioned in Economic Survey of India. The chapter is called Agriculture, and the theme is More from Less. Agriculture that brings basically bread to almost nearly half of the households and it supplies it to the remainder. This is the opening statement of the chapter in economic survey. They mean by this that 50% of the population is indulged in agriculture, and while these 50% are providing to bread to the rest of 100% population of India. While non-farm activities are becoming increasingly important, and there is still a core truth in this particular fact, as Theodore Schultz, the Nobel Prize, in his Nobel Prize lecture, he suggested that most of the world's people, poor people, they earn their living from agriculture. So, if we knew the economics of agriculture, we would know the much of the economics of being poor. So that is a very significant statement in itself. He is actually suggesting you that if you want to know the economics of being poor, then study the people who are indulged in agriculture. गरीबी को अगर आपको जानना है तो उन लोगों की आर्थिक स्थिति और इकोनॉमिक्स को समझिए जो लोग एग्रीकल्चर से संबंधित कार्य करते हैं. Actually, I'll be taking this lecture a little bit in Hindi and little bit in English so that our Hindi speaking friends do not feel themselves excluding, and as well as I'll try to manage and cope up with the friends from southern part of India. Well, moving on. Indian agriculture, if we talk about Indian agriculture's growth, it has come along a long way since independence. Earlier, we were having chronic food scarcity. Now that has been turned to grain self-sufficiency through green revolution and all. And despite we have a 2.5 times increase in our present day population from the time of independence. But as I mentioned earlier about green revolution, but in context of Indian culture, the economic survey suggests that in a way Indian agriculture is victim of its own success. How come? Well, over the time, this green revolution success is posing to be a major threat. Indian agriculture has become cereal centric and as a result regionally biased and input intensive, consuming generous amount of land, water and fertilizer. As you must be aware that green revolution basically focused over wheat. So our focus of Indian agriculture has been pointed towards, or it includes mainly the grain based crops, cereals, and due to this thing our other crop segments are being ignored. And mind it, as we use so much of water, fertilizers in the green revolution, so the trend is still going on, and still these cereal based, grain based crops are input intensive, and that also takes into amount of so much of land, water and fertilizer, and we all are aware that country is facing problem just because of this fertilizer subsidy and other things. Encouraging other crops, notably pulses, via rainbow revolution to follow the green and white revolution. So it will be necessary to encourage other crops. And why it is necessary? Because we have to match the supply with evolving dietary patterns that favors greater protein consumption, as the income structure of the Indian society is changing, so the more protein intake is getting its increasing share in the Indian platter. So, but if you are more and more concentrating on wheat and grain crops, so how will you provide them the much needed protein? Because protein comes from pulses, protein comes from dairy products, protein comes from meat products, but our whole focus is on cereal based crops. So we have to actually move our shift to that way. So there is sharp decline in cultivable land per person in India. This blue line is suggesting China. This green line is depicting Brazil's per capita availability of arable land, and this saffron line is depicting India's growth. So, as you can see, in 1960, per person availability of land was much higher, almost 3.5 hectares per person, and that is continuously going down towards as we are moving in year 2010. Okay, so the sharp decline in cultivable land per person in India is much sharper than the other countries as we are comparing with Brazil and China. And over the next 20 years, India's fast population growth will make the cross-country comparison even less favorable for India. If as at the pace with which the India's population is rising, so these trends are further going to be exaggerated. If we talk about the water challenge, this figure that depicts that India has much lower levels of water per capita than Brazil, that is one of India's world leading agricultural countries. This continent is exaggerated because, this constant is exaggerated because while Brazil and China, they both use approximately 60% of their renewable freshwater resources for agriculture, but India, that uses a little more than 90% of its freshwater resources for agriculture. So you can see almost a rise of 30% than China and Brazil. So that is why per capita availability of renewable freshwater resources is less in India. And if we take into the consideration the productivity part of Indian agriculture, the central challenge of Indian agriculture is low productivity, for no doubt. That is evident in modest average yields. We got average yields that is very low, especially pulses, and we actually talked about in last slide. First consider the main food grains of India, which like wheat, on which green revolution was concentrated, and paddy, that is rice cultivation. These two cereals are grown on the most fertile and irrigated areas in countries, जो कि उत्तर के मैदान हैं, the northern plains, and where the land is irrigated through tube wells of canals. But these two cereals, wheat and rice, these two cereals are grown on most fertile and irrigated areas in country, and they use a large part of resources that government is channeling to agriculture. What are these sources? That is whether water, fertilizers, power, that is electricity, or even credit from banks for crop loans, and even MSP, the mechanism given by the government. So these all factors are being utilized only mostly by these two crops, that is wheat and rice, while other crops, especially pulses, are being ignored. Even then, average yields of wheat and rice, after this much utilization of fertilizers, water, power, bank credit, MSP support, even then the average yield of wheat and rice is much below than that of China's or of Brazil's. In case of China, it is 46% below in case of rice and 39% in case of wheat. Okay? And India's average yield in 2013 of 3075 kilogram per hectare, that was much lower than even world's average of the 3257 kilograms per hectare. But although Punjab and Haryana are having much higher yields of almost 4500 kilograms per hectare, but most of other Indian states have yields which are much lower than that of even Bangladesh. India happens to be major producer and consumer of pulses, both producer and consumer, and that is a major producer and consumer, and it is also one of the major source for protein of the population. We got a higher percentage of vegetarian population. So India has low yields comparable to most countries. On an average, countries like Brazil, Nigeria, Myanmar, they are having higher yield. Some of states do much better than all India average, but even the key pulse producing states of Madhya Pradesh, MP, they are having yields of 38 kilograms per hectare. That is barely 3/5 of China's. China is having almost 1550 kilogram per hectare. Whereas in comparison to that, our most mean pulse producing state, that is MP, that is only having 938 kg per hectare. So you can see the stark difference between almost of 600 kgs per hectare. Given that I told you that India is a major producer and consumer of pulses, imports cannot be the main source of meeting domestic demand. We have to produce pulses domestically within India, and we cannot rely over imports. Okay, so next question which economic survey treats, that is, where are the crops grown? That is actually, you'll see that this is a double blow for pulses. Dal और दूसरी फसलों के लिए this is having a almost double impact. वो कैसे? देखिए, it is immediately apparent that the production pattern for pulses is very different from other crops. It is not like rice, it is not like wheat. Not only it is, most of the land is dedicated to growing pulses in each state is unirrigated. Mind it, this is not, pulses are not being sown on irrigated lands. They are still being practiced in unirrigated lands, but the national output of pulses that comes predominantly from unirrigated lands, as I told you. In contrast, large share of output in wheat, rice and sugarcane. Wheat, rice and sugarcane, ये फसलें बोई जाती हैं पंजाब, हरियाणा और यूपी में डोमिनेटली, लेकिन ये बोई जाती हैं इरिगेटेड लैंड पर, ऑन इरिगेटेड लैंड, whereas pulses were sown predominantly on unirrigated land. Even in water scarce महाराष्ट्र जहाँ की पानी की बहुत कमी है, सारी शुगर कैन की जो फसल है, that is being grown on irrigated land. Actually meeting the high and growing demands for pulses in the country. जिस तरीके से I told you that income levels of medium families and or common Indian household is rising, so they can afford protein in their plate. So demand for protein is rising, but we are not able to supply that much protein in the requirement as India is requiring. So this increase in more area under pulses, we cannot increase this until and unless agriculture policies, if they are being continued to focus largely on cereals and sugarcane, how come we gonna fulfill the needs for protein through pulses? So what is this? What does this mean for farm incomes? The distorted pattern of pulses, wheat and rice, what is the impact on farm income? So economic survey tries to give you answer For this, they say the negative consequences of low agriculture yield extend from precarious income of farmers to the large tract of lands locked into low value agriculture. That means they are having low incomes, and moreover the land that has not been put to good use, and they are still practicing the low value agriculture. The low value agriculture means the agriculture which is fetching less value to the farmer. Despite even at the time when there is a rising demand for fruits, for protein, for meat products and other things, we are still practicing low value agriculture. So India is receiving blow on two ends. One is its farmers are suffering, and another is its demand for public demand for these products is not being fulfilled. So according to NSS data, the average annual income of Indian farmer after deducting the production cost from cultivation is less than 20,000 rupees per annum. Can you believe that? Average Indian farmer is having 20,000 rupees per annum. If you divide it by 12, you can easily take that he is merely getting almost 2,000 or 3,000 only per month. Okay. So, and this NSS data that includes that this 20,000 is actually having the value of crop which farmers have not sell. They did not sell just because predominantly presumably for their self consumption. Even after including that value as well, their total value for income per annum is only 20,000. Now further, economic survey talks about the critical input, and in this series it takes water first. Although water is one of the India's most scarce natural resource, India uses 2 to 4 times more water to produce a single unit of major food crop than does China and Brazil. That means उसका कहने का मतलब है कि हम लगभग दोगुना या चौगुना पानी यूज करते हैं एक यूनिट फूड क्रॉप के पैदा करने में जितना कि चाइना इन कंपैरिजन टू चाइना एंड ब्राजील. Hence, it is imperative that country focus on improving the efficiency of water use in agriculture. Since independence, India has invested numerous resources on irrigation, both public, that is canal irrigation, and private, that is tube-well irrigation. In both cases, the water has been deployed via flood irrigation. What is flood irrigation? As you must have seen in the crop field, this is for example crop. So they will let the water fill in this crop field up to a certain height. This is we call flood irrigation. And actually this flood irrigation is extremely inefficient form and use of water. Irrigation investment that must shift to adapting technologies like sprinkler and drip irrigation and rainwater harvesting. You can always leverage the labor available under the Manregas where that is possible. As we are running this Manrega scheme, so even this rainwater harvesting, other activities for water conservation, this labor can be put to use. So in order to facilitate this shift from flood irrigation to new technologies like sprinkler and drip irrigation, the new irrigation technologies need to be accorded, and infrastructure lending status to these projects should be accorded, and both center and state need to increase public spending for micro irrigation. Without center or state's support, the farmer cannot on his own go for the sprinkler and drip irrigation, because there is certain restraints about which we will be discussing, that why these sprinkler and drip irrigation is a costly affair than the flood irrigation. The consolidation of ongoing irrigation schemes, for example, accelerated irrigation scheme, a benefit program, and integrated watershed management program, and on-farm water management program, which are being embedded into Prime Minister's Krishi Sinchai Yojana, PMKSY. It offers the possibility of convergence and of investment in irrigation from water source to distribution and end use. It has been recognized that the key factor which actually undermining the efficiency of water use is subsidies on power for agriculture. What happens? In India, we are providing farmers the subsidized electricity, for which they use their motor pumps and tube wells, and they run it for hours without even understanding that how much water is needed, and therefore there is overexploitation of the groundwater. That apart from its benefits towards farmers, incentivize wasteful use of water and hasten the decline of water levels, as I told you. According to an analysis by National Aeronautics and Space Administration, that is NASA, India's water tables are declining at a rate of 0.3 meter per year. Can you imagine? 3 meter per year. So we need to take steps in this direction. Between 2002 and 2008, the country consumed more than 109 cubic kilometers of groundwater. That is actually double the capacity of India's largest surface water reservoir, the Upper Wainganga. So we have even, almost doubled उसकी capacity से भी ज़्यादा हम लोग पानी को use कर चुके हैं between 2002 and 2008. That is 109 cubic kilometers of groundwater. That is a serious situation. Now, we were talking about micro irrigation to get rid of the problem of this flood irrigation, a promising way forward actually to increase the productivity while conserving water, more or less. It will conserve your water, and is to adapt micro irrigation methods. In drip irrigation, for example, perforated pipes are placed either above or slightly below the ground and drip water on the roots and stems of the plant. So it directs waters more precisely to the crop that needs it. An efficient drip irrigation system, it reduces the consumption of fertilizers through fertigation. What is fertigation? Let's understand this fertigation is before moving to next topic. Actually, fertigation is injection of fertilizers, soil amendments and other water soluble products into the irrigation system. वो पानी में ही इन सारी चीज़ों को मिला देते हैं. Then these through pipe, this water soluble fertilizers are being applied to the crop through drip irrigation or sprinkler irrigation. And the water which is lost due to evaporation, that is also less, and it also provides you with higher yields than traditional flood irrigation. The key bottlenecks in applying such phenomena of irrigation is actually the high initial cost of purchase and the skill required for the maintenance of these infrastructure. However, we can overcome these hurdles. The increase in yields and reduction in cost of power. Increase in yields and reduction in cost of power and less fertilizer uses. These are the three things through which we can actually overcome the initial high cost of purchase. How come? Increase in yields, reduction in cost of power and fertilizer use. They can help farmers to recover the fixed costs quickly. Provisions for credit to farmers can incentivize greater adoption of this technology. But there will be also substantial reduction in irrigation cost and savings on electricity and fertilizer, as I told you, through fertigation method. This is because water is efficiently supplied and hence pumps they will be used for a limited time. Then the farmer will be saving on both these fronts. Moreover, water soluble fertilizers are supplied directly to the directly to the roots, and the plant will be having less wastage of fertilizer, and it will be utilizing it to the optimum usage. So yields of the crops will also go up almost for 45% in wheat and 20% in gram and 40% in soybean. The resulting improvement in net farm incomes is substantial because the yields are going up, the uses of water, uses of fertilizers, uses of electricity pumps, that will also decrease your bills. So the farm savings, the farm incomes are bound to rise. Until now, micro irrigation techniques, owing to high fixed costs of adaptation, have mostly been used for high value crops. But, however, recent research has shown its feasibility even in wheat and rice. So, if we talk about policies, minimum support price, MSP, and procurement policies, when planting crops, farmers, they face several uncertainties in terms of their realized prices in several months following their harvest. फॉर एग्ज़ाम्पल उन्होंने सितंबर में अपनी फसल लगाई, अप्रैल में जाके उन्होंने ये अपनी फसल की कटाई की, लेकिन इस फसल को लगाने से और इसको फाइनली हार्वेस्ट करने से एक प्राइस में काफ़ी ज़्यादा डिफरेंस आ सकता है. सो इन नॉर्मल कोर्स, इन प्रिंसिपल, इफ यू टॉक एज एन इकोनॉमिक्स, अ फार्मर he could actually buy a option contract. I suppose you all know the future and option contracts. He can buy an option contract to reduce this price uncertainty and make corresponding cropping decisions. But in reality, this option is unavailable for all but minuscule fractions of India's farmer. Instead, the future prices, to save farmers from uncertainty of prices, future prices are guaranteed by the government through MSP, that is minimum support price. But while government announces MSP for 23 crops, effective MSP linked procurement occurs mainly for wheat, rice and cotton. While there is no government procurement per se in sugarcane, that is a crop with assured irrigation, what happens? Mills are legally obligated by government to buy canes from farmers at a price fixed by the government. So it will more or less, it is like an effective MSP like engagement. But even for these crops, MSP is restricted to a subset of farmers in a few states. This can be observed in large gaps in percentage of farmers who actually seem aware of MSP policy. There is a less number of farmers who are actually aware that such thing like MSP is going on or being running by government. In Punjab and Haryana, almost all paddy and wheat farmers are aware of MSP policy. However, very few farmers who grow pulses. Look, in Haryana and Punjab, the farmers who grow wheat and rices, they are aware, but farmers who grow pulses and other crops, they are less aware for that MSP is being, government provide any support through MSP price policies. So, even for paddy and wheat, where active procurement occurs, जहाँ से government actually MSP price पर procure करती है, there is a substantial variation across the state, with only half or less paddy and wheat farmers reporting awareness of MSP, especially in states such as Gujarat, Maharashtra, Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh and Jharkhand. This points to the possibility that procurement in these states may be happening to some district or not in other district. What economics survey is actually suggesting us that in these so-called MSP aware farmers, they are not having the full benefit of MSP policy, because in Gujarat, Maharashtra and Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh and Jharkhand, that actual procurement by government on MSP prices in these districts, the districts of these states, is actually not happening. So despite an MSP policy is under operation, is undergoing, but still practically it is not providing any relief to the farmers of these states. Thus, we can say that while in principle MSP exists for most farmers, for most crops, its realistic impact is quite limited for most farmers in the country. So public procurement, moving on, public procurement at MSP has been disproportionately focused on wheat and rice, and to some extent up to sugarcane, and perhaps at the this focus is even at the expense of other crops such as pulses and oilseeds. So this has resulted in buffer stocks of paddy and wheat to the above required norms. That means whatever was required, for example, we need only 100 kgs of wheat and rice, but just because MSP is favored in these on the side of these two crops, wheat and rice, so we are having more stocks of these crops what is required, and we are having less stocks of pulses, and that also cause frequent price spikes in pulses and edible oils despite substantial imports of these commodities. So the absence of MSP procurement for most crops in most states implies either that farmers are selling their products to private intermediaries above MSP, or the converse, that is, farmers have little option but to sell their produce at the price lower below the MSP. So the next question arises that how can we rationalize MSP? One way of rationalizing MSP policy is to take these price signals affect the social rather than the private returns of production. Now, what does this mean? There are actually two returns from any production. One is social return and one is private return. Social return is a return per se to the entire community, and private return are just predominantly in the monetary forms to the person who actually owns or carry out that production. For example, मैं अगर कहूँ कि मैंने एक हेक्टेयर में पैडी कल्टीवेशन किया, ठीक है, इस पैडी कल्टीवेशन से मुझे मॉनेटरी टर्म्स में कितना पैसा मिला, दैट इज माय प्राइवेट रिटर्न्स. बट इस पैडी कल्टीवेशन से कितना मीथेन प्रोडक्शन हुआ, कितना पानी का एक्स्ट्रा यूज हुआ, हाउ मच इलेक्ट्रिसिटी वॉज वेस्टेड, दैट इज सोशल रिटर्न. एंड इट ऑल्सो कंसिडर द कितने लोगों को ये राइस जो है खाने को मिला. सो ऑल टुगेदर इट contains the social cost and social return, and then the author is suggesting that these MSP prices, they should take into the consideration the social and private returns of the production. Okay, if we calculate return from both social and private in growing wheat, sugarcane or paddy, while taking account of negative externalities of from using chemical fertilizers. That means if we use chemical fertilizers that will result in soil depletion and its depletion of health. Then second is water, falling water tables, and from burning crops, adverse health consequences. He will find that the social returns to pulse production is higher than the private returns, because pulse production that not only use less water and fertilizers, but it also fixes the atmospheric nitrogen naturally, and it helps keep the soil porous and well aerated because of its deep and extensive root system. These positive social benefits should be incorporated in the MSP estimates. And secondly, Farmers could also be assured a floor price for their crops through a price deficiency payment. Now, what is this price deficiency payment? Under this system, if the price in an agriculture produce market committee APMC, if price under in this system in this APMC mandi they fell below the MSP, then under this scheme, under this mechanism, farmer would be entitled to a maximum of for say 50% of the difference between the MSP and the market price. For example, MSP was declared as 100 rupees, whereas market price fell before these 100 rupees, for example, say 80 rupees. Okay. Now, under price deficiency payment, what will happen? The difference between MSP and market price, that is 100 minus 80, that is 20. So 50% of this rupees 20, that is 10 rupees, the farmer will be entitled for these 10 rupees as a compensation for the floor price which has fallen below the MSP. So this subsidy which the farmer is entitled for this 10 rupees, it can be given to him through direct benefit transfers, DBT scheme. This system will actually help the quantum of subsidies bill in check, and side by side it also be consistent with India's obligation to the World Trade Organization, that is WTO. The next point on which this economic survey throws light is agriculture, research and education. In order to address India's multiple challenges in agriculture, we will require significant upgradation of country's national agriculture research and extension system, that is required. And if we talk about NARS, India's National Agricultural Research System, it actually comprises the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, ICAR, and other central research institutes and national research centers set up by ICAR. So, together with Agricultural Research University, while playing a key role in the Green Revolution back in the recent times, but in present years, however, this agricultural research, despite of so many institutions and agricultural universities, they are being plagued under investment, scarcity of investment and neglect by the government in the area of agricultural research and education. The system has been set by three more main weaknesses. One, in states where agriculture is relatively more important as measured by their share in agriculture and GDP, जहाँ पर GDP की जिस स्टेट की GDP में agriculture का share ज़्यादा है, even in those states the agriculture education is especially weak if measured by the number of students enrolled in the agricultural universities. And this is especially true in the states, in northern states. In Punjab and Haryana को अगर हम छोड़ दें, so UP and other northern states, यहाँ पर agricultural students agricultural universities में बहुत कम है, which turns into less agriculture education in these states, despite the fact कि इन states में agriculture का GDP share ज़्यादा है. The agriculture universities have been plagued by उनकी अपनी कुछ problems हैं. In turn, agriculture universities की भी अपनी कुछ problems हैं. First is resource crunch, difficulty in attracting the talented faculty, and limited linkage and collaboration with international counterparts. And मतलब जो फॉरेन एग्रीकल्चरल यूनिवर्सिटीज़ हैं उनके साथ किसी लिंकअप की कमी होना, एंड वीकनिंग ऑफ लैब टू लैंड कनेक्ट, दैट मीन्स लैब में क्या है और लैंड में क्या रिक्वायरमेंट है, हम क्या यहाँ डेवलप कर रहे हैं और क्या एक्चुअली हमें चाहिए, ये हमारी कनेक्टिविटी, ये अपना कोऑर्डिनेशन अभी बहुत अच्छा नहीं है इन यूनिवर्सिटीज़ के साथ, एंड लैक ऑफ इनोवेशन. So these all are the problems because of which Indian universities, agricultural universities, are not able to perform well. Moreover, investment in public agricultural research in India, that is needed to be augmented. Given the large externalities, the central needs to play a more important role. India's current spending, if we talk about central's role, India's current spending on agricultural research and as a share of agricultural GDP, even less than that of Bangladesh and Indonesia. Okay, it is much below than that of China. That is okay, but even it is lesser than of Bangladesh and Indonesia. And third problem which agricultural research and education is facing, that is, there is a strong need to take steps to enhance research productivity amongst the scientists. Well, in public agricultural research institute, the performance indicators suggest that the majority, that is almost 63.5% of the scientists, they had low to very low level of productivity. For example, the rapid rate of innovation required in pulses, it can be achieved by securing participation from private sector, which hitherto has remained largely limited. Why? Due to small scale of pulse production in the country. So when the sector is itself underlooked in the country, then scientists in these areas are not so keen to work upon. This can potentially be of the form of pull system of research, similar to Kramer's HIV/AIDS vaccine idea. इस सिस्टम में क्या किया जाता है? In such a system, the winner is offered a proportionately large enough award for innovating desirable agricultural traits, but the intellectual property right of the innovation are transferred to the government. So this is sort of a win-win situation for both government and to the innovator. And India should also, fully leverage the new low-cost technologies that have been that has been promoted by various local level scientists and in local areas. So it will be having wider benefits for agriculture. Nowadays, for example, cell phones have been creatively used by countries, even by countries like Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria and Thailand. What they do by it, they provide information on prices and cultivation to the farmers, which has led to massive increase in their farm incomes. Since even the cost of drones have been fallen sharply. So they can be used by state agricultural universities to provide crucial information on crop health, irrigation problem, soil variation and even pest and fungal infestations that are not apparent to the eye level for the farmers. So even drones can be used in this regard. A host of studies have demonstrated the significant net benefits of GM crops. With leading countries such as Brazil and China, they are opening up to the new GM technologies, and they are even aggressively building their own research capacity. Nonetheless, there are good reasons. Yes, there are reasons for some of the public apprehensions of these GM crops, but India need to, put its regulatory process in order so to evolve as to address the concern in a way that does not come in the way adopting high yielding technologies and rapidly moving towards the world's economical technological frontier. So we have to mend our legal process and other processes, regulatory processes, in order to give way to the GM crops after considering the health issues and other aspects. And this is it for now, for this agriculture part of the economic survey. And in next videos we'll be taking up other chapters of economic survey. Till then, thank you for watching, and you can visit our website as well, www.decipheries.com. And till then, until we come with the new chapters from economic survey, do like us on our Facebook page. Thank you, and bye bye. Take